He found his neighbor's abandoned bride freezing in his barn and changed her life forever. The sun was just beginning to rise over the frozen plains, casting a soft golden light on the snow-covered land. Jesse Colton tugged his coat tighter around his broad shoulders as he stepped out of his small cabin, his boots crunching in the snow with every step. The cold was biting this morning, a typical winter day in the wild frontier. His ranch was quiet. The only sound was the soft whistle of the wind as it blew across the open land. As Jesse approached the barn, something caught his eye. A shadow in the distance, a figure that didn't belong. He frowned, puzzled. It was still early, and the only person who would be out here at this hour was Old Man Hawkins, who came to check on his cattle. But the figure wasn't Old Man Hawkins. This one was much smaller, huddled against the barn door. Jesse's heart began to race as he hurried toward the figure. When he reached the barn, his breath caught in his throat. There, lying on the ground in the straw, was a woman. Her skin was pale, lips blue from the cold, her body curled into a tight ball for warmth. She was shivering uncontrollably, her clothes thin and wet from the snow. Without thinking, Jesse dropped to his knees beside her. His rough hands touched her shoulder gently, shaking her awake. She let out a small, weak gasp before her eyes fluttered open. At first she looked confused, then terrified. Her eyes were wide with panic, her body trembling not just from the cold, but from fear. "Easy now," Jesse said, his voice low and soothing. He helped her sit up, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "You're safe. Just relax." The woman looked at him through blurry eyes, but there was something familiar about her. Jesse couldn't put his finger on it, but he could see she was scared, lost, and alone. "What's your name?" Jesse asked gently. She hesitated, her eyes darting around as if unsure of where she was or how she had gotten there. Then, with a weak voice, she spoke. "Lucinda. My name's Lucinda." "Lucinda," Jesse repeated softly, his brow furrowing in thought. He didn't know any Lucindas around here. "How did you end up out here?" She bit her lip, looking down at the snow-covered ground. Tears started to well up in her eyes. "I was supposed to be married to Ryder O'Connor," she whispered, her voice shaky. But he left me. I don't know where he is. I was supposed to go to his ranch, but he never came for me." Jesse's heart softened as he looked at the fragile woman sitting beside him. There was no mistaking it now. She was abandoned, left in the freezing cold with nowhere to turn. "Come on," Jesse said, lifting her gently to her feet. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." With his arm around her, Jesse helped Lucinda stumble toward the cabin, her steps slow and unsteady. As they reached the door, Jesse paused, glancing back at the barn. He didn't know much about Ryder O'Connor, but he had heard the name around town. A man of means, running a big ranch just a few miles down the road. How could a man like him leave a woman like Lucinda out here to freeze? Once inside, Jesse settled Lucinda by the fire, wrapping her in more blankets. He couldn't help but feel responsible for this woman, though he knew he had no obligation to her. She wasn't his to take care of. But the way she looked at him with those scared eyes made it impossible to turn her away. Lucinda's eyes fluttered closed as she sank into the warmth, her breath coming easier now. But Jesse could tell she wasn't asleep. Her mind was racing, caught in thoughts she couldn't escape. Slowly, she began to speak again, her voice barely more than a whisper. He promised me," she said, her voice filled with pain. "He promised he would be there, that he would love me. And I thought we'd have a future together. But when I arrived at his ranch, he wasn't there. I waited for days, hoping he would come. I was a fool." Jesse's chest tightened. He knew that kind of pain all too well, the feeling of being betrayed by someone you trusted. It was something he had lived with for many years, even if he had never spoken about it. Lucinda's hurt mirrored something deep inside him, something he had locked away. "There's no need to apologize," Jesse said softly, trying to comfort her. "You did nothing wrong." "You don't understand. I have nothing now. I don't even know where to go from here. I thought I had a future with him. I had dreams. But now I don't know what's left for me." Jesse sat down across from her, his expression calm but intense. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't even know why she had come this far, or why she had been left to die alone. But he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her stranded. "You've got a place here, as long as you need it," Jesse said. "I'll make sure you're safe." Lucinda's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time, they weren't just tears of sorrow. There was something else there, something Jesse couldn't quite place. She looked at him as though he had given her a lifeline, a way out of the dark hole she had fallen into. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know what to say. You've saved my life. Jesse nodded, his voice steady. It's nothing. Just take it easy for now. We'll figure the rest out later. Lucinda let out a shaky breath, looking into the crackling fire as it danced in the hearth. For the first time in days, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. And that, Jesse thought, was a good place to start. The morning light filtered through the small cabin's windows, casting a soft glow over the room. Jesse Colton sat by the fire, watching the flames flicker and dance as they crackled. The warmth from the fire filled the room, but it wasn't enough to erase the chill that still lingered in Lucinda's eyes. She had slept through most of the night, wrapped in blankets, her breath steady and deep. But even as she rested, Jesse could tell she wasn't at peace. There was something haunting about her, something she was trying to hide, something that made her more than just the abandoned bride she appeared to be. After breakfast, Lucinda sat by the fire again, looking into the flames as if searching for answers in the flickering light. Jesse had left her alone for a while, not wanting to crowd her, but he knew it wouldn't be long before she would have to face her past. "Feeling better?" he asked, his voice breaking the silence that hung in the room. Lucinda nodded, but her face remained drawn, distant. "Yes, thank you for everything. I'm better than I was yesterday." She hesitated, her fingers twitching nervously. "But there's something I need to tell you. Something I've been hiding." Jesse leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready for. But if it's something that's weighing on you, I'm here to listen." Lucinda took a deep breath, her eyes closing briefly as if steeling herself. I'm not just some woman who was left behind at the altar, Jesse. I came here for a reason. I thought Ryder would be my escape, but it wasn't just him I was running from." Jesse waited, sensing the heaviness of the words she was about to say. He had no idea what kind of life Lucinda had led before she came to him, but something told him it wasn't a peaceful one. She began to speak slowly, her voice trembling with the weight of old memories. "My family, it wasn't the kind of family most people have. We weren't rich or well-known. My father was a miner, always working in the hills, always chasing after something he couldn't quite catch. And my mother, she was always afraid. Afraid of what my father might do, afraid of how poor we were. But the worst part was that she was afraid of me." Jesse's heart ached as Lucinda's words hung in the air. He could hear the pain in her voice, the years of hurt she had carried. "Afraid of you?" he asked quietly. "Why?" Lucinda took a deep breath, wiping away the stray tears that had fallen down her cheek. "I don't know exactly, but I always felt like I wasn't good enough. My mother used to tell me I'd never be as good as the other girls. She said I was too loud, too stubborn. My father would just sit in a corner, not saying anything, letting her talk. I wanted to leave. I wanted something more than the dirt and the dust. I wanted a life where I didn't have to hide who I was." Jessie could see the fight in her eyes now, a fight that had been buried under years of hurt and rejection. She had spent so long trying to hide who she was, trying to be someone else for the sake of others, but now, in the quiet of his cabin, it was clear that she was tired of pretending. "Ryder wasn't my first choice, Jessie," she continued, her voice breaking. "I thought he was. But when he proposed, I was already running away. He was just a way out, a way to escape my past. But even when I thought I was free, it was like my past followed me everywhere. That's why I couldn't stay at his ranch. I thought it would be the fresh start I needed, but when I arrived, he wasn't there. And that was the moment I realized I was still running from myself, from everything." Jessie said nothing, letting her process her thoughts. It wasn't his place to fix what had been broken, but maybe he could help her heal. "Ryder was different," Lucinda said after a while, her voice barely above a whisper. "He wasn't like the men I knew. He seemed kind and steady, but maybe I was just looking for someone to save me. I thought he could, but I should have known better." Jesse watched her closely, his heart heavy for the woman who had been through so much. "You're not the first person to think someone else could save them," he said softly, "but I think you're starting to realize that you have to save yourself first." She had spent so much of her life trying to find someone to fix her, to make her feel whole. But Jessie was right. The only person who could truly help her was herself. "I don't know what to do next," she admitted. "I've never been good at making decisions for myself. My mother always made them for me, and Ryder, well, I thought he would make them for me too." Jesse stood and walked to the window, his hands resting on the sill as he stared out at the snowy landscape. "You're here now. You have a chance to make your own decisions, Lucinda, to live for yourself, not for anyone else. You don't need to answer to anyone, not your mother, not Ryder, and not even me. Lucinda looked up at him, a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty in her eyes. But what if I'm not strong enough? You're stronger than you think, Jesse replied without turning around. You've already made it this far. The silence stretched on, and for the first time in a long while, Lucinda felt a sense of peace. She wasn't running anymore. She didn't need to be anyone else but herself. But there was still a lot to figure out. What was she going to do now? Where could she go from here? Thank you, she whispered after a while, for not turning me away, for seeing me even when I couldn't see myself. Jesse turned, meeting her gaze. You don't have to thank me. I just did what anyone would do. But if you want to stay here, you're welcome to. You don't have to leave. Lucinda smiled faintly, but there was something different in her expression now, something lighter, freer. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time she was beginning to believe that she could face it on her own terms. I think I might just stay, she said softly. For a while, at least. Jesse nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. We'll figure things out, one day at a time. As the day wore on, the two of them sat in comfortable silence. The wind howled outside, but inside the cabin there was a warmth that came not just from the fire, but from the understanding between them. Lucinda wasn't alone anymore, and that in itself was enough to begin her healing. The days passed quickly, and soon winter's grip on the land began to loosen. The snow, once deep and heavy, started to melt, leaving behind patches of brown earth where the grass could finally breathe. But inside Jesse Colton's cabin, the warmth was constant. The fire crackled every evening, and the soft hum of life between Jesse and Lucinda had become a comforting routine. Still, despite the peace that had settled in the cabin, there was an uneasiness that neither of them could shake. For Lucinda, it was the constant question that lingered in her mind. What now? She had been given a second chance by Jesse, but the past was never far behind. It had followed her here, and now, like a shadow, it loomed over her every decision. It was clear she had to choose a path, but which one? She had no idea what her future held, and part of her still wasn't sure where she belonged. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden light over the hills, Ryder O'Connor arrived at the cabin. Jesse was outside tending to the horses when he heard the sound of hooves. He turned, and for the first time, he saw Ryder O'Connor riding toward him with an expression that looked far more serious than the last time they had met. The man was tall, built like a man who worked hard but lived for the thrill of success. He was dressed in a fine coat, more fitting for city life than the rugged plains, and his face was set in a firm, unreadable expression. Jesse didn't move, his arms crossed over his chest as he waited for Ryder to approach. He had no love for the man, not after what he had done to Lucinda, but he wasn't going to start a fight, not today. He'd let Ryder say whatever it was he had come to say. Jesse Colton, Ryder called as he pulled his horse to a stop. We need to talk. Jesse didn't answer immediately. He took a moment to examine the man in front of him. The same Ryder he had heard about, rich, charming, and used to getting what he wanted. I don't have much to say to you, Ryder, Jesse replied, his voice steady, but there was a hint of warning in it. Ryder's eyes narrowed, but he didn't back down. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to get Lucinda back. Jesse felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice calm. Lucinda is not some prize to be won, Ryder. She's a person, and you've already taken enough from her. You don't get to just waltz in and claim her again. I didn't leave her, Ryder snapped, his anger now clear. I was pressured into a marriage by my family. I tried to tell her, but she wouldn't listen. I was going to make things right. I thought she'd come around. Is that what you call it? Making things right? Jesse's voice was colder now. You left her, abandoned her in the cold, and now you think you can just come back and fix everything with words? Ryder's face hardened, but before he could speak, Jesse cut him off. If you want to fix things, then you need to start by telling her the truth. Tell her everything, not just what you think she wants to hear. For a moment, Ryder said nothing. His eyes were full of frustration, but there was something else there too, something like doubt. He looked over at Jesse, then at the cabin behind him. Where is she? Ryder asked, his voice softening. I need to talk to her. Jesse didn't answer right away. He could feel the tension between them. The unspoken understanding that Lucinda had to make a choice, but that choice was hers alone. She's inside, Jesse finally said, but I don't know if she's ready to talk to you. She's been through enough. Ryder nodded, dismounting from his horse with slow, deliberate movements. I owe it to her to try. Please, Jesse didn't move as Ryder walked past him and toward the cabin. He didn't stop him. He couldn't make Lucinda's decision for her, but he wasn't sure he liked what was coming next. Inside, Lucinda was sitting by the fire when she heard the door open. She looked up to see Ryder standing in the doorway, his eyes immediately locking with hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of what had happened and what might come. Then, finally, Ryder spoke. "Lucinda," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. I should have never left you." She didn't move, her face a mask of calm, but her eyes were searching, full of pain and uncertainty. "Why, Ryder? Why did you leave?" He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Because I wasn't ready. My family, they pressured me into the marriage. I was scared. I didn't think I was good enough for you." Lucinda stood, her legs a bit unsteady from sitting too long, but she held herself together. "So you thought running away was the answer?" she asked, her voice sharp but controlled. "You didn't think that maybe I needed you to stand by me?" Ryder reached out, but she stepped back, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I know I failed you," Ryder whispered, regret in his voice. "But I've changed, Lucinda. I want to make it right. Let me show you. I can give you the life you've always dreamed of." Lucinda stared at him, but the weight of his words wasn't enough to erase the hurt she had carried with her. "It's not just about the life, Ryder. It's about trust. You broke that, and I can't go back. I can't live my life for someone else anymore." Jesse had been standing in the doorway watching the exchange, but at that moment, he stepped forward. He wasn't going to let Ryder take what was rightfully Lucinda's to decide. "She's made her decision," Jesse said firmly, his voice steady and full of quiet strength. "You had your chance. Now it's time for her to live her life on her own terms." Lucinda looked over at Jesse, meeting his eyes. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe, like she wasn't trapped by the past anymore. She didn't need to rely on anyone else to make her happy. Ryder stared at them both, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "You think you can just take her away from me?" he asked, but there was no fire in his voice anymore, just resignation. Lucinda shook her head. "I'm not a prize to be won. You can't take what was never yours to begin with." With those words, she walked past Ryder and toward Jesse, who gave her a nod of silent understanding. Outside, the wind began to pick up, but inside the cabin, Lucinda felt warmer than she had in a long time.
She had made her choice.
And it was the first choice she had made for herself in years. As Ryder left without another word, Lucinda felt a weight lift from her heart. She wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't lost. And for the first time, she believed that the future could be whatever she wanted it to be. The days had become warmer, the snow finally melting as spring made its way across the land. The once dead trees were beginning to sprout new leaves, and the air smelled of fresh earth and growth. Inside Jesse Colton's cabin, Lucinda sat by the window, looking out at the world that seemed to be waking up just like her. After the confrontation with Ryder, life had become simpler, though still filled with challenges. Lucinda was no longer the lost woman she had once been. She had made her decision. She had chosen to stay with Jesse, not out of obligation, but because she finally understood that she was the one in control of her future. The road ahead was still unclear, but that was okay. For the first time in years, she felt like she could breathe. Jesse had been quiet during the days after Ryder had left. He was patient with her, giving her the space she needed while also making sure she felt welcome in his home. He never pressured her to talk about the past, but when she did, he listened, without judgment, without rushing her. It was exactly what she needed. That morning, Jesse was outside working on the fence, a task he had been putting off for weeks. Lucinda watched him from the window, a quiet smile on her face. She had started to feel like part of this place. The ranch, once a lonely place for him, was now a place of comfort and possibility. She stood, smoothing out the dress she had started sewing herself. Jesse had mentioned that the weather was warming up, and soon they would need to begin planting for the coming harvest. The thought of being able to contribute in a meaningful way, to be part of something larger than herself, made her feel alive in a way she had never felt before. Walking outside, Lucinda found Jesse working by the fence. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, a small grin spreading across his face as he wiped his hands on his trousers. "Morning, Lucinda," said softly, her eyes meeting his. She still wasn't used to the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like she wasn't just a fleeting presence in his life, but she was learning to trust it. "Morning," Jesse replied, his voice warm. You ready to help me out here? What needs to be done? Jesse gestured to the part of the fence that had started to sag in the middle. I need to fix this part. It's been leaning for a while, and I need to get it sturdy before the cattle start grazing near it. Lucinda picked up a hammer and a few nails from the tools lying on the ground. I've never built a fence before, she said, a bit unsure, but excited to try. Well, we're both learning something new every day, Jesse replied with a wink. Come on, I'll show you how it's done. For the rest of the morning they worked side by side, fixing the fence and laughing when things didn't go as planned. Lucinda had never felt so at ease with someone before, especially a man who had opened his home and heart to her without expecting anything in return. As they worked, Jesse couldn't help but notice how much stronger Lucinda had become. The fragile woman who had arrived in his barn just a few weeks ago, shivering and broken, was now standing tall, with purpose in her step. The changes in her weren't just physical, though he had seen the light return to her eyes. It was the way she carried herself now. There was a quiet strength in her, a newfound confidence that came from making her own decisions. When the fence was finally repaired, Jesse stood back, surveying their work. Not bad, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. We make a good team. Lucinda smiled, her cheeks flushed from the work and the warmth of the sun. I think we do. That evening, as the sun began to set, Jesse and Lucinda sat on the porch, enjoying the peaceful silence of the land around them. The wind had picked up, and the air was cool, but the warmth between them was undeniable. Lucinda turned to Jesse, her face thoughtful. You know, I never thought I'd be happy here. When I first arrived, I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought I'd just end up being a failure, running from one mistake to the next. Jesse looked at her, his expression soft. You're not a failure, Lucinda. We all have our pasts. It's what we do with them that matters. She nodded slowly, her fingers playing with the edge of her dress. I never really believed that before. I thought I had to be perfect, that I had to be someone else to be loved. But here, I can just be me. And that feels more like home than I've ever felt. Jesse's heart warmed at her words, and he took a deep breath before replying. Home's not just a place. It's where you feel like you belong. And if you feel like you belong here, then that's all that matters. Lucinda looked at him, her eyes shining with something deeper than gratitude. She didn't have the words to express everything she was feeling. All she knew was that, for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They sat together in silence, listening to the sounds of the land around them. The quiet hum of nature, the rustling of leaves in the wind, the distant calls of birds, everything felt right. The weight of the past had started to lift, and though she knew there would still be difficult days ahead, Lucinda felt ready to face them. I'm glad I came here, she said, her voice steady and sure. I'm glad I found you. I'm glad you came too, Lucinda. You've brought something to this place I didn't even know I was missing. And for the first time since Lucinda had arrived, she truly believed it. She had found not only a place where she could start over, but a person who understood her in a way no one else had before. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, casting a soft, golden light over the land. It was a new day, a new chapter in her life, and Lucinda was ready to write it.